The crystal vase slipped from the silver tray before Jade Morrison could steady her grip. Time seemed to slow as the expensive piece tumbled through the air of the Portland Grand Hotel ballroom. The crash echoed through the space like a gunshot, silencing conversations and turning hundreds of elegant heads in her direction. Jade felt her stomach drop. She had been working at the hotel for only 3 weeks, juggling this evening shift with her morning job at a coffee shop and afternoon hours at an art supply store. Sleep was a luxury she could barely afford, and exhaustion had made her fingers clumsy. But she knew the truth even before her coworker stepped away with wide, innocent eyes. Thomas had bumped her arm deliberately. She had seen the smirk before he disappeared into the crowd. The hotel manager materialized beside her within seconds, his face red with barely contained fury. His voice carried across the room with intentional volume. "Miss Morrison, this is unacceptable. First you were late to your shift yesterday, and now you have destroyed a vase worth more than your monthly salary." "Sir, I can explain," Jade began, her voice shaking despite her effort to sound calm. "Someone bumped into me and I..." "Excuses," he cut her off with a dismissive wave. "Remove your uniform vest and leave immediately. Your final check will be mailed." The humiliation burned through her chest like acid. Around her, guests in designer gowns and tailored suits whispered behind champagne flutes, their eyes sweeping over her worn shoes and the frayed hem of her black pants. She recognized some of them from the society pages she had seen while waiting in dentist offices and grocery store checkout lines. These were people who spent more on a single dinner than she made in a month. Being fired meant more than losing this job. It meant she would not make rent in 5 days. It meant the small studio apartment where she had finally started to feel safe after months of couch surfing would be gone. It meant she might have to sell the few art supplies she had managed to save for, the only things that gave her hope for a different future. A stranger's observation. Jade bent down automatically, reaching for the broken pieces even though her hands trembled. She needed to do something, anything, to maintain a shred of dignity. But a quiet voice stopped her. "Do not touch that. You might cut yourself." She looked up into the face of a man she vaguely recognized from a business magazine cover she had flipped through last month. Nathan Pierce. The tech investor who had made headlines for his innovative approach to sustainable energy investments. In the photos, he had looked distant and polished. In person, standing just a few feet away, he looked tired. There were shadows under his dark eyes that makeup could not have hidden, and the way he held himself suggested someone carrying an invisible weight. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit, but unlike the other wealthy guests who wore their expensive clothes like armor, he seemed almost uncomfortable in his. His presence commanded attention without demanding it, and when the manager rushed over with a suddenly obsequious smile, Nathan barely glanced at him. "Mr. Pierce, I apologize for this disruption," the manager gushed. "This employee has been terminated and will be leaving immediately." Nathan ignored him completely. His attention remained fixed on Jade, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. She felt exposed, as if he could see past the cheap uniform and exhausted expression straight to the fear underneath. "Are you hurt?" he asked her directly. The simple question, spoken with genuine concern, nearly broke through the careful control she had been maintaining. Nobody had asked if she was okay. They had only cared about the broken vase and the scene she had caused. She swallowed hard and forced herself to nod. "I am fine. Just clumsy, apparently. An impossible proposition." Nathan's expression shifted slightly, something almost like understanding crossing his features. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a slim leather wallet. Jade watched in confused silence as he pulled out several bills and held them toward her. "I need your help tonight," he said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that the hovering manager had to lean in to hear. "Stay by my side during this event. Help me navigate the social aspects. I will pay you $500 for a few hours of your time." Jade stared at the money, then at his face, searching for the punchline. This had to be some kind of cruel joke, maybe arranged by Thomas as a final humiliation. Rich men did not offer struggling waitresses hundreds of dollars just to stand beside them at charity events. There had to be a catch, some unspoken expectation that would make her feel even worse about herself than she already did. "I do not understand," she said carefully, hating how small her voice sounded. "Why would you want my help? There are hundreds of people here who actually belong in this world." "That is exactly why I do not want them," Nathan replied. His tone was matter-of-fact, without condescension or false charm. "Everyone here is performing a role. They say what they think will benefit them and smile at people they cannot stand. I have been watching you for the past 20 minutes, and you are the only person in this entire ballroom who seems genuinely human." The weight of desperation. Jade felt her throat tighten. She wanted to refuse on principle, to tell this stranger that she was not for sale regardless of how desperate her situation had become. Pride was one of the few things she still possessed, and it urged her to walk away with her head high. But pride did not pay rent. Pride did not buy groceries or keep the electricity on. Pride would not prevent her from ending up back on her friend's couch or worse, sleeping in her car during a Portland winter. She thought about the eviction notice sitting on her kitchen counter, the red letters screaming their deadline. She thought about the art school application she had been saving for, the dream that felt further away with each passing month of survival mode. She thought about her mother's voice during their last phone call, worried and helpless, unable to offer financial help from 3 states away. Nathan waited patiently, not pressuring her, simply holding the money with an expression that suggested he understood the impossible calculation she was making. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. This was not a man playing games. This was someone who looked almost as lost as she felt, just in a completely different way. "Nothing inappropriate," he added quietly when she still had not moved. "Just conversation and your presence. That is all I am asking for." Jade's fingers shook as she reached out and took the bills from his hand. The paper felt heavier than it should have, weighted with implications and consequences she could not yet imagine. But in that moment, with her pride crumbling under the pressure of necessity, she made a choice that would alter the trajectory of her entire life. "Okay," she whispered. "I will stay." Nathan nodded once, and something in his expression eased slightly, as if her agreement had lifted a burden he had been carrying alone. He extended his arm in a gesture that was oddly old-fashioned and respectful. "Thank you, Jade. I promise you will not regret this." As she placed her hand lightly on his arm and let him guide her away from the scene of broken crystal and shattered dignity, Jade had no idea whether his promise would prove true. All she knew was that the night ahead felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness, trusting that something other than emptiness waited below. The ballroom lights seemed brighter suddenly, or perhaps it was just the contrast of moving from shadow into light. Either way, as they walked together into the crowd of curious faces and whispered questions, Jade felt the strange sensation of her old life ending and something entirely unknown beginning. The ballroom transformed around Jade as she walked beside Nathan Pierce. What had been a place of humiliation moments ago now felt like foreign territory she was being granted temporary access to explore. The chandeliers cast warm light across marble floors so polished they reflected the faces of guests like mirrors. Servers glided between clusters of people holding trays of delicacies Jade could not name, their movements practiced and invisible. Nathan kept his hand rested lightly at the small of her back, a gesture that felt protective rather than possessive. She became acutely aware of how her simple black pants and white shirt contrasted with the designer gown surrounding them, but Nathan seemed entirely unbothered by the attention their unlikely pairing generated. A woman in a silver dress approached with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Nathan, darling, we have been looking everywhere for you. Who is your lovely companion?" Nathan's response was polite but brief. "A friend. If you will excuse us, we were just heading to our table." The woman's smile faltered slightly, curiosity burning in her gaze as she watched them move past. Jade felt dozens of similar looks following their path through the crowd. She heard fragments of whispered speculation carried on the air like smoke. Where did he find her? What is he thinking? Is this some kind of statement? They are going to talk no matter what we do, Nathan said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. I learned a long time ago that their opinions matter far less than they believe they do. They reached a table near the front of the room, positioned to have a clear view of the stage where speakers would eventually address the crowd. Nathan pulled out a chair for her, another gesture that felt genuine rather than performative. As she sat, Jade noticed that her hands had finally stopped shaking. Cracks in the perfect surface. The dinner service began with a procession of courses Jade barely tasted. Her appetite had vanished under the weight of anxiety and exhaustion. Nathan ate little as well, she noticed. He pushed food around his plate while maintaining conversations with the people who stopped by their table, each interaction following the same pattern. They would greet him with enthusiasm, probe for business opportunities or social connections, acknowledge Jade with barely concealed confusion, and then move on when Nathan offered nothing of value. Between these interruptions, moments of quiet settled over their table like islands of calm in a turbulent sea. Nathan would lean back in his chair, his shoulders dropping slightly as if releasing tension he had been holding. Jade found herself studying his face in these moments, noticing details she had missed before. The slight tremor in his hands when he reached for his water glass. The way his eyes would drift toward the exit doors as if calculating escape routes. The tight set of his jaw that suggested he was enduring rather than enjoying the evening. You really hate this, do not you? She asked during one of these quiet intervals. Nathan looked at her, surprise flickering across his features before settling into something that resembled relief. That obvious? Only if someone is actually paying attention, Jade replied. Which most people here are not. They are too busy performing. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth, the first genuine expression of pleasure she had seen from him all evening. You are observant. That is a rare quality in spaces like this, where everyone is too focused on how they appear to notice how anyone else actually feels. Being broke teaches you to read people quickly, Jade said, then immediately regretted the honesty. She did not want to remind him of the vast gap between their circumstances, the reality that he had essentially purchased her presence for the evening. But Nathan did not flinch from her words. Instead, he nodded slowly. I imagine it does. Wealth teaches the opposite lesson. It teaches you to trust no one because everyone wants something from you. The story behind the shadows. A photographer moved through the ballroom, capturing images of the event for the society pages and charity documentation. When the camera's flash turned in their direction, Jade felt Nathan go rigid beside her. His breathing changed, becoming shallow and rapid. His hands gripped the edge of the table with enough force that his knuckles turned white. The transformation was so sudden and complete that Jade acted on instinct rather than thought. She shifted her chair closer to his and placed her hand over one of his clenched fists. Nathan, look at me. Not at the camera. Just focus on my voice. His eyes found hers, dark and clouded with something that looked like panic. She kept her voice low and steady. Breathe with me. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Can you do that? He managed a slight nod, and together they breathed through the moment while conversations and laughter swirled around them, oblivious to the private crisis unfolding at their table. Gradually, the color returned to Nathan's face and his grip on the table loosened. The photographer had moved on, capturing smiles and staged moments elsewhere in the room. Thank you, Nathan said quietly, his voice rough with emotion he was clearly trying to suppress. I should explain. You do not owe me explanations, Jade said, though curiosity burned through her. But I am willing to listen if you want to talk. Nathan was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on their hands where hers still rested over his. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, as if each one required effort to release. My business partner, my closest friend, died 8 months ago. Car accident, sudden and senseless. At the funeral, photographers were everywhere. They pushed forward during the service, taking pictures while I was trying to speak, while his mother was sobbing. I could not breathe, could not think. Every flash felt like an assault. He paused, swallowing hard. Since then, cameras trigger something in me. My doctor calls it acute stress response. I call it proof that I am falling apart in a world that demands I hold everything together. Jade felt her heart constrict with recognition. She understood the weight of expectations, the pressure to appear strong when everything inside felt like it was crumbling. I am sorry for your loss and for the way people treated that moment like entertainment. His name was David, Nathan continued, and saying the name seemed to ease something in his expression. He was the person who reminded me why we started our company in the first place. Not for money or recognition, but because we wanted to solve problems that mattered. After he died, everyone wanted to talk about succession plans and market strategy. Nobody wanted to acknowledge that I had lost the only person who saw me as something other than a balance sheet. Sharing wounds. The main course was cleared away and replaced with an elaborate dessert that neither of them touched. Jade found herself speaking before she could second-guess the impulse. My roommate stole from me 3 months ago. We had been friends since college, or so I thought. She waited until I was working a double shift, then cleared out our apartment of everything valuable. Electronics, my grandmother's jewelry, even my winter coat. She left me with the rent bill and a note saying she had found a better opportunity in Seattle. Nathan turned his full attention to her, listening with an intensity that made her feel truly heard for the first time in months. She continued, the words flowing easier now. I trusted her completely. We had supported each other through bad relationships and family drama. I thought we were building something stable together. Finding out that I meant so little to her that she could just disappear with my things, that broke something in me. That is a profound betrayal, Nathan said softly. The kind that makes it hard to trust anyone again. Exactly, Jade agreed, surprised by how much relief she felt at being understood. Since then, I have been working 3 jobs, trying to rebuild from nothing. Some days I am so tired I can barely remember my own name. But I keep pushing because the alternative is giving up, and I refuse to let her theft define the rest of my life. Nathan studied her face with an expression that held both admiration and sadness. You are remarkably strong. Most people would have collapsed under that pressure. Jade laughed, but the sound held no humor. Strong is just another word for having no choice. I keep going because stopping means losing everything. There is no safety net when you grow up the way I did, no family money to fall back on or connections to call in favors from. It is just me, every single day, fighting to stay above water. Recognition across distance. The speeches began, and various charity representatives took the stage to discuss their work and thank donors. Nathan and Jade sat in companionable silence, both grateful for the reprieve from conversation. But Jade found her attention drifting from the stage to the man beside her. In profile, with the warm light casting shadows across his features, Nathan looked younger and more vulnerable than his public image suggested. She could see the exhaustion that mirrored her own, the weight of responsibilities that never seemed to lighten. Despite the expensive suit and the deference shown to him by everyone in the room, he seemed profoundly lonely. The realization struck her with unexpected force. Wealth had not protected him from loss or pain. Success had not shielded him from grief. The distance between their circumstances was vast in practical terms, but in the ways that actually mattered, they were not so different. They were both people trying to survive in a world that felt increasingly hostile, both carrying wounds that had not yet healed, both searching for something genuine in spaces filled with pretense. When the speeches ended and people began moving toward the ballroom's bar area for networking, Nathan made no move to join them. Instead, he turned to Jade with a question that felt weighted with significance. Would you walk with me? There is a garden terrace on the floor above that should be empty this time of night. Jade knew that accepting meant extending their arrangement beyond the original parameters. The event was effectively over, and she had fulfilled her part of their agreement. She could take the money he had given her, thank him politely, and return to her regular life with enough cash to solve her immediate crisis. But something in his expression, a quiet plea hidden behind careful neutrality, made her nod. Yes, I would like that. Above the noise. The garden terrace was exactly as Nathan had described it. Empty and peaceful, with climbing vines woven through metal lattice work and soft lighting that mimicked moonlight. The sounds of the city provided a distant backdrop, traffic and voices blending into white noise that somehow made the space feel more intimate. They stood at the railing, looking out over Portland's skyline. The bridges glowed like strings of jewels across the dark river, and lights from countless windows created constellations in the urban landscape. Cool night air carried the scent of late autumn, that particular mixture of dying leaves and approaching winter. Nathan broke the silence first. I did not come here tonight planning to meet anyone, let alone someone like you. Someone like me? Jade asked, uncertain whether to be offended or curious. Someone real, he clarified, his voice thoughtful. Someone who says what they mean and feels things honestly. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? Every conversation is calculated, every interaction has an agenda. People tell me what they think I want to hear or what will benefit them most. Nobody just talks anymore. Jade considered this, thinking about her own experiences in the opposite direction. In my world, honesty is sometimes all we have. When you cannot buy comfort or security, you hold on to truth because it costs nothing and cannot be taken away. I envy that, Nathan said quietly. The clarity of it. Do not, Jade replied with more sharpness than she intended. Poverty is not noble or enlightening. It is exhausting and dehumanizing, and it strips away dignity piece by piece until you barely recognize yourself. Nathan turned to face her fully, his expression serious. I did not mean to romanticize your struggles. You are right, and I apologize for being thoughtless. The sincere contrition in his voice softened Jade's defensiveness. She sighed, leaning against the railing. I am sorry too. I should not have snapped at you. You have been nothing but kind to me tonight, even when you did not have to be. You had every right to call me out, Nathan said. I never want to be the kind of person who forgets that money is not a shield from suffering, just a different context for it. They stood together in silence for several minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Nathan spoke again, his words careful and measured. I want to help you, Jade. Not as charity or obligation, but because meeting you tonight reminded me that connections between people can still be genuine. Would you let me offer you more substantial assistance? Perhaps help with rent or living expenses while you find stable work? Jade's first instinct was to refuse, to protect the fragile pride that had already been battered enough for one evening. But she forced herself to pause and really consider his offer. This was not pity or manipulation. This was one human being trying to help another because circumstances had allowed their paths to cross. Why? She asked simply. What do you get from helping me? Nathan smiled, and for the first time that night, it reached his eyes. Hope, maybe. The feeling that despite everything broken in this world, small acts of kindness still matter. You helped me tonight more than you realize. You saw past the performance to the person underneath and offered compassion without expecting anything in return. That is worth more than any investment I could make. Jade felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. I do not know what to say. Say you will think about it, Nathan suggested gently. No pressure, no strings attached. Just an offer from someone who would like to see you have a real chance at the life you are working so hard to build. The city lights blurred slightly as Jade nodded, unable to trust her voice. In the span of a few hours, her entire world had shifted. She had gone from facing eviction and despair to standing on a terrace with a man who saw her as a person rather than a problem. The future still felt uncertain, but for the first time in months, it also felt like it might contain possibilities beyond mere survival. The terrace air grew colder as the night deepened, but neither Jade nor Nathan seemed eager to leave the peaceful sanctuary they had found above the chaos of the city. Jade wrapped her arms around herself, not quite shivering but aware of the temperature dropping. Without a word, Nathan shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was so natural and unassuming that Jade accepted it without protest, pulling the expensive fabric closer around her body. It still held warmth from his skin and carried the faint scent of subtle cologne mixed with something uniquely him. "Tell me about your art," Nathan said, leaning against the railing beside her. "You mentioned working at an art supply store. Do you create?" Jade hesitated, surprised that he had caught that detail from their earlier conversation. Most people heard her list of jobs and saw only desperation, not the threads of passion woven between survival tasks. "I paint," she admitted softly. "Mostly landscapes and abstract pieces. Nothing that pays bills or impresses galleries, but it keeps me sane. When I can afford canvas and decent paint, I lose myself in color and texture. Those are the only hours when I do not feel like I am drowning." Nathan turned to look at her, genuine interest lighting his features. "What draws you to landscapes?" "The permanence of them, I think," Jade said, her voice taking on a dreamy quality as she thought about her work. "Cities change constantly. People move through life leaving barely a trace. But mountains and rivers and forests, they endure. They witness everything and remain standing. There is comfort in that kind of steadiness when your own life feels like shifting sand." She paused, embarrassed by how much she had revealed. That probably sounds pretentious. Failed artist trying to justify her mediocrity with philosophy. "It sounds like someone who understands that art is about more than technique or commercial success," Nathan countered firmly. "The most meaningful work comes from people who create because they must, not because they expect recognition. David used to say that about my early projects. Before our company grew into what it became, when we were just two people in a garage trying to solve energy problems, he reminded me constantly that the work mattered more than the outcome." Stories in the darkness. Nathan's expression grew distant, lost in memories that clearly brought both joy and pain. Jade waited, giving him space to continue if he chose. After a moment, he did. "David was an engineer, brilliant with systems and equations, but he never lost sight of why we were doing any of it. When investors pushed us to compromise our environmental standards for faster growth, he was the one who kept us honest. He had this way of cutting through corporate speak and asking the simple question that revealed everything. Do we believe in this or not? He sounds like he was an incredible person," Jade said gently. "He was," Nathan agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "And when he died, I realized how much of my purpose had been tied to his presence. Without him asking those questions, without him keeping me grounded, I started questioning why I was building anything at all. The company runs itself now with competent people in every position. I show up to board meetings and charity events because that is what founders do, but the fire that drove me in the beginning, that died with David." Jade absorbed this confession, understanding the profound loss it represented. "Maybe that fire is not gone," she suggested carefully. "Maybe it just needs different kindling. You cannot recreate what you had with David, but you could find new purpose that honors what he believed in." Nathan looked at her with something approaching wonder. "How are you so wise when life has given you every reason to be bitter?" "I am not wise," Jade laughed, though the sound was gentle. "I am just stubborn. Bitterness takes energy I cannot afford to waste. I would rather channel what little strength I have into hope, even when hope feels foolish." The honesty between them had deepened into something rare and precious. Jade recognized it as the kind of connection that happened once in a lifetime if you were lucky, the collision of two souls at exactly the moment when both needed to be seen. She knew that after tonight, regardless of what practical help Nathan might offer, something fundamental had shifted in how she understood the world. Suffering was not a competition, and empathy could bridge even the widest gaps of circumstance. Confronting assumptions. Nathan straightened from the railing, turning to face Jade fully. His expression was serious but open, vulnerable in a way that suggested he was about to say something that mattered deeply to him. When I saw you tonight, struggling with that broken vase and facing humiliation from people who have never known real hardship, I made assumptions. I thought I was helping someone who needed rescue, someone whose life I could improve with money and connections. Jade felt her defenses rising, old wounds from being treated as a charity case beginning to ache. But Nathan continued before she could speak. I was wrong. You do not need rescue. You need support, yes, and practical assistance that could make your path easier. But you are not broken or helpless. You are someone fighting with everything you have, maintaining integrity and creativity despite circumstances that would crush most people. Meeting you did not confirm my assumptions. It shattered them completely. The words landed in Jade's chest with unexpected force. She had spent months feeling diminished by her circumstances, internalizing the judgment of people who saw her service jobs and shabby clothes as evidence of failure. Having someone recognize her strength rather than her struggles felt like being given permission to see herself differently. I made assumptions too, Jade admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought wealthy people were all the same. Shallow and disconnected, caring only about status and appearance. I thought having money meant you could not understand real problems or genuine pain. You proved me wrong tonight. Your grief is as real as mine. Your loneliness cuts just as deep. The zeros in your bank account do not make you less human. Nathan smiled, but sadness lingered in his eyes. We spend so much time in our separate worlds, never really seeing each other as complete people. The rich assume the poor are lazy or damaged. The poor assume the rich are callous or corrupt. Both sides miss the truth that we are all just trying to survive our particular versions of difficulty. Maybe that is what tonight was really about, Jade mused. Not charity or transaction, but two people accidentally being honest with each other in a space that usually demands performance. The offer without strings. Nathan pulled his phone from his pocket and opened a contact form, typing briefly before turning the screen toward Jade. This is my personal email and phone number. Not my assistant or business line, but the contacts I give to people I actually want to hear from. I mean what I said about helping you. Tomorrow, if you are willing, I would like to meet and discuss practical support. Rent assistance, yes, but also connections to galleries if you want to pursue your art more seriously. Introductions to people who could offer stable employment that actually uses your talents. Jade stared at the screen, her mind racing through possibilities and pitfalls. Accepting his help meant creating an ongoing connection, opening herself to the vulnerability of owing someone who existed in a completely different stratosphere of society. It meant trusting that his kindness was genuine and not the prelude to expectations she could not fulfill. But it also meant giving herself a real chance. It meant not having to choose between rent and food, not having to work herself into exhaustion just to maintain a bare subsistence. It meant time to paint, to breathe, to imagine a future that contained more than survival. She took his phone and carefully entered her own number, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed. When she handed it back, Nathan saved the contact immediately, a small smile of satisfaction crossing his face. No pressure, he said again, emphasizing the words. If you change your mind after tonight, if you decide you would rather maintain your independence without my involvement, I will understand and respect that completely. But I hope you will give me the chance to prove that help can come without strings or hidden agendas. I believe you, Jade said, and realized as she spoke that it was true. Despite every lesson life had taught her about trusting cautiously and protecting herself first, she believed Nathan Pierce meant exactly what he said. His pain had made him genuine in ways that comfort and security never could. Walking back into reality. They left the terrace together, riding the elevator down to the hotel's main level in comfortable silence. The ballroom had emptied considerably, with only cleanup staff remaining to restore the space to its usual pristine state. The manager who had fired Jade earlier stood near the entrance, his expression shifting through several emotions when he saw her emerge with Nathan Pierce, still wearing his jacket. Nathan noticed the man and steered Jade directly toward him with purposeful steps. The manager's face paled as they approached. "Mr. Pierce, I hope you enjoyed the evening. If there is anything we can." "You fired this woman unjustly tonight," Nathan interrupted, his tone cold and commanding in a way Jade had not heard before. "I witnessed the incident. She was not at fault, yet you humiliated her publicly without investigation or basic fairness. I want you to know that I will be discussing tonight's events with the hotel ownership. People in service positions deserve respect and due process, not scapegoating for the mistakes of others." The manager stammered, his eyes darting between Nathan and Jade. "Sir, I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. Perhaps we could discuss Miss Morrison returning to her position." "She will not be returning," Nathan said flatly. "She deserves far better than working for someone who treats employees as disposable. What you can do is provide her with a written apology and ensure her final paycheck includes severance. I will follow up to confirm this happens." Jade stood silent beside him, stunned by the casual authority in his voice and the way the manager immediately agreed to every demand. This was a side of Nathan she had not seen on the terrace, the billionaire accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Yet even wielding that power, he used it on her behalf rather than his own interests. The beginning of something new. Outside the hotel, the night air bit at exposed skin and carried the smell of rain that would arrive before morning. Nathan's car and driver waited at the curb, but he made no immediate move toward it. Instead, he turned to Jade one final time, his expression soft again now that they were away from watching eyes. "Thank you for tonight," he said sincerely. "For your honesty and your presence and your willingness to see me as a person rather than a portfolio. You gave me something I had not felt in months. Hope that genuine connection still exists somewhere in this performance we all pretend is real life." "I should be thanking you," Jade replied, emotion tightening her throat. "You turned the worst night I have had in months into something that might actually change my life. That is not nothing." Nathan reached out and gently squeezed her hand, the gesture friendly and reassuring rather than romantic. "Call me tomorrow. Or the day after, whenever you are ready. We will figure out the practical details together. But even if you choose not to accept help, I want you to know that meeting you mattered. You reminded me why kindness is worth the risk of being hurt." Jade nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying. She watched as Nathan climbed into his car and the driver pulled away from the curb, taillights disappearing into the flow of city traffic. Standing alone on the sidewalk in a borrowed jacket worth more than her monthly rent, Jade felt the full weight of the evening crash over her. She had started the night facing eviction and humiliation, convinced that the world was fundamentally unfair and that people like her simply did not catch breaks. She was ending it with a phone full of contacts, a jacket she would need to return, and the strange, fragile feeling that maybe the universe was more complex than she had believed. That maybe kindness still existed in unexpected places, and that connection could happen across any divide if both people were brave enough to be honest. The morning after, Jade walked the 12 blocks back to her studio apartment, unable to afford a taxi but not minding the journey tonight. Her mind replayed conversations and moments, examining them for hidden meanings or warning signs she might have missed. But no matter how critically she analyzed the evening, she kept coming back to the same conclusion. Nathan Pierce had been genuine. His pain was real, his kindness was sincere, and his offer of help came from a place of recognizing shared humanity rather than exercising power. When she finally reached her building, climbing the 3 flights of stairs to her door, the eviction notice still sat on her counter where she had left it that morning. But now, instead of representing inevitable disaster, it felt like a challenge she might actually have resources to meet. She pulled Nathan's jacket tighter around herself and allowed hope to bloom in her chest, fragile but persistent. The money he had given her sat in her pocket, enough to cover rent with some left over. But more valuable than the cash was the shift in perspective, the understanding that her story was not over and that asking for help was not the same as admitting defeat. Whatever came next, whether she accepted Nathan's ongoing support or chose to maintain her independence, she knew that tonight had been a turning point. Jade moved to the small window that looked out over the city, watching lights flicker in distant windows where other lives unfolded in their own private dramas. Somewhere out there, Nathan Pierce was probably lying awake as well, thinking about the strange collision of circumstance that had brought two strangers together in exactly the moment when both needed to remember that isolation was a choice rather than an inevitability. She thought about David, the friend Nathan had lost, and about her former roommate who had betrayed her trust. She thought about all the ways people hurt each other and all the ways they sometimes, unexpectedly, chose kindness instead. The world contained both cruelty and compassion, and perhaps the measure of a life well lived was simply choosing which force to feed with your own actions. As dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Jade finally allowed herself to believe that tomorrow might bring something better than today. That her art might find an audience, that her struggles might ease, that connection with another human being could be the first step toward rebuilding a life that felt worth living rather than simply endured. She would call Nathan tomorrow. She would accept his help with grace rather than shame. And she would remember that the night she accepted money from a stranger for a few hours of her time had become the night she learned that assumptions were often wrong, that wealth and poverty were simply different contexts for universal human experiences, and that sometimes, when you least expected it, the universe offered second chances disguised as impossible propositions. The story of Jade Morrison and Nathan Pierce was just beginning, but already it had taught them both that the walls separating people were often built from fear and misunderstanding rather than true incompatibility. And that when two people chose honesty over performance, connection over isolation, the result could transform everything that came after. The end.